Welcome to the Palm Court Podcast. Mike Palmer here. Happy, as always, to be joined by Grant Balfour and Megan Cytron. Welcome to the show, folks.
Hi, how's it going?
There's a bass fishing team. Did you see this?
Yeah, they're trying to start one, yes.
Try to start a bass fishing
And
team.
the location of the bass is about 50 miles inland from the campus, right?
Right.
And when you're fishing for bass, it's a freshwater fish, and the campus is on saltwater. So, yes, you'd have to go well up the Mayaca River.
Interesting. Well, there you go. But anyway, we're back.
A different county.
Yeah, there you go. But we're back. The Palm Court Podcast is going strong. I think we're about 10 episodes in now. We're playing a little bit of catch up today where there's an older conversation. It turns out this episode was recorded on the night of the Oscars, the night of the infamous Will Smith slap, where prior to that, I think the champagne carpet was still in effect when we were recording. Grant and I recorded a proto episode of what has now become the Palm Court Podcast. It really wasn't the Palm Court Podcast until Megan joined.
I had no idea you guys were doing this because afterwards we were all on WhatsApp processing the Oscars.
Will Smith.
One of our big days of the year in our group.
Exactly. Because we've stayed in touch. Part of why the flow is such that it is on this show is that we've been in pretty much daily contact on a WhatsApp group. And that daily started in the pandemic, and
it started as a March Madness pool in the pandemic. I think that's important.
Yes.
And then it's an outgrowth of new college athletics, after all.
That's true. Although it's
none of us watched any of it, but we do comment on it. We don't stop
some of us.
Well, it's also been co-opted into more of an Oscar. I think there's always a countdown, how many days until the Oscars.
Well, the Oscars had been delayed, so we said, let's keep this party going. And then Suzanne suggested, let's make this an Oscars group. And that's what it's pretty much been ever since, is an Oscars group.
Although it's multi-purpose.
World Cup came in there at one point.
Ecumenical in its interest.
Eurovision.
Yeah, absolutely. Eurovision's big. Yeah.
Very tolerant. Eurovision was huge. Exactly. But the episode today is with Troy Winfrey and Joanne Dramko. And shout out to Troy, especially because his otter helped salvage the recording, which apologies in advance if the audio quality is not as high as it is for the other episodes. But Grant, I know you brought these folks into this conversation. You know, Megan, I knew Troy a little more than I knew Joanne, but they overlapped with us a little bit. They were a few years ahead of you, Megan. But you've been in regular contact with them. You still play
role-playing games. Yep.
Exactly. Can you catch us up a little bit on your recollection of the conversation and your connection to how you would describe Troy and Joanne?
Describing Troy and Joanne is difficult. You know, we're all different breeds of role-playing nerd. And one of the things that I really wanted to get the conversation more into maybe was the band that they were in together at New College, which was kind of seminally awful.
Was that the Righteous Surfucks? I forgot that.
That was the Righteous Surfucks. F-U with an umlaut.
I swear, I've mentioned this in the past. This podcast is better than Prevagen. I swear, things that I thought I completely forgot suddenly come into crystal clarity.
And am I correct that the other members other than Joanne and Troy were Ken Clem and I think Charlie was the drummer?
Charlie was the drummer. Ken Clem.
Charlie, who lives here in Spain. We see him on.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
What's Charlie's last name?
Gear.
Yeah.
Gear.
Gear.
Okay. But you can find him on Instagram as El Americano, Los Americanos.
Yeah, he's a writer and he has a whole persona.
Brilliant writer.
Ooh.
He's a really great writer.
Maybe a potential future guest. I don't know. This is nice.
Yes, his magazine thing on the gun in the house is great.
Very
I don't know. I like when you bring this stuff up, Grant, because then I assume it'll be in the show notes in some capacity. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. But the Righteous Surfucks, Troy played throat, is how he said it. He did not say he sang.
Yeah.
He kind of didn't.
Punk rock. Yeah.
Yeah.
Carnal.
Yeah. Very, very, very carnal. A lot of meat in that.
Yeah.
But he also was kind of the founder of the Facebook group Damon. So involved with the alum. He was on the alumni board at one point.
Interesting writer, blogger. He's been He's
Yeah,
done
kind
work
of a
in as a
business.
consultant in
Yeah.
UX design, and like
Yeah,
he's doing
exactly.
interesting work for sure. So it's cool
Mhm.
to get him. And then Joanne has an interesting background as well. And
I
we'll
thought
kind
her background was interesting because she's
Yeah.
similar to Steve with the arts and the
Yeah,
sciences
right.
and all
yes,
mixed up together.
yes. And also getting out on her own, like as a consultant in environmental design,
Yeah,
her own
it's a
practice.
I don't think it's her own practice. She works with people. It's like a consulting firm, but I think
Mhm,
it's small.
mhm.
But yeah, and still she also does painting and stuff on the kind of
Yeah,
on the side. She has shows every now and again,
yeah.
I think.
Any thoughts on what you picked up out of the conversation?
I thought it was really interesting how many things, this was sort of a proto podcast conversation before we started talking to all these other people, but so many of the themes that came out later were right there in the
Mhm,
beginning, with being self-directed and Joanne kind of going to the school and explaining her special case and finding a home in another place, because of how different her background was and, kind of negotiating. I think that comes up in this conversation, just negotiating great situations for yourself because you had to do that at New College and telling your story. And
mhm.
I thought that was really interesting. I also liked how you called having a fifth year a badge of honor, which I haven't ever heard anyone say it quite like that. That was entertaining.
Yeah, I still like to say I was on the accelerated 5-year plan,
I
but,
was a 4.5, so I'm
yeah,
kind of in between.
that's
I
like
just lingered.
a half badge. Yeah.
I graduated and just stuck around a little too long.
I was happy that you brought role playing in. That was a real powerful cultural element really throughout our time at New College. There were like the Dungeons and Dragons. There was the Dungeons and Dragons crew. Dave
Yeah,
Goldfarb in particular is the guy we're trying to get back on the show because he's kind of parlayed that into a pretty incredible career
pretty great career. Yeah,
in gaming and game design. Not too dissimilar from Shannon
Shannon.
Ingalls,
Yeah.
who we
Yeah.
had on recently. But anything else jump to mind for you around this conversation? And then we'll get into it so folks can hear it.
Actually, what jumps out to me is not this conversation per se, but like those are, I think of myself as like not exactly old guard, but medium guard, whatever, during the merger.
Yeah.
But I signed on to do some mentoring for current students,
Yeah.
and I've been matched with this guy who's like basically turning New College into a role playing game. Like that's his
Mm,
thing.
mm.
There's this thing called map gaming, which I'm trying to suss out. Like it's kind of strategy gaming where you make up your rules depending on your context. It's
Hmm. It sounds a little LARPy to me.
weird
I don't know.
stuff.
Is it
It's
LARPy?
not a LARPy per se. It's more like creating simulations within a rule set. So you're not going out and like putting on a costume and like I am sword fighting or whatever. It's like,
Oh,
okay, you are at New College. Here's the political structure, whatever. Like there are these professors who have power and you want to exert your influence
ah,
here. Like what kind of things you have to roll dice to do?
I see.
What does success look like in this surrounding? And
Just to
so
clarify, you're not prevented from dressing up. Like if I wanted to LARP while map gaming, that's
I would
okay?
I would imagine if there was some sort of faction of LARPers that
Yeah,
became important to whatever strategy you were trying to
right.
enact.
I might need to do like a saving throw roll to make sure I'm not ostracized for
Yeah.
dressing up to LARP all by myself.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are the power dynamics of this hostile takeover part of the game, or is it completely independent from that?
Oddly, this student is like not. We don't talk about it.
Mm,
Like it's just not a thing. Like he's
mhm.
like, I live in a hotel. It's all right. Sometimes I'll
It's
see his roommate kind of walk by him in the background. I'm not supposed to have a sandwich up here, but I do, which is
it's
fine.
oh my gosh.
I don't mean to get
At
too
least
technical.
kudos to you for mentoring folks. And it sounds like there's some interesting stuff. We do want to get students on. Like, I think we're starting to
Yeah.
get wider and wider representation. It was great getting to talk to recent grads, but it's got to be even more deep on
Yeah, it's
multiple
strange. Like
levels. Yeah.
this guy's a second year. So like this
Mm,
is
mhm.
definitely shaping his experience
I'm
in a way
sure.
that our experience was not shaped.
Yeah.
Like maybe Steve Jacobson went through something like this because he
Mm,
was during the merger,
Hmm.
right? He signed
yeah.
up right before and then the merger happened, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
I think it was him, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Um,
So it's the same kind of like ground shifting under your feet kind of thing, I think is
Yeah.
going on. Only he is the goldfish who was in the water.
Right. But at least he has better role playing games that he
Yeah,
can
definitely.
engage in. See, it's like, it's like a
Bigger selection.
coping mechanism. Yeah, that's true. It might not be better. That's true.
Are
Old
you
school.
giving him career advice? Because that's one of the things that comes up in this discussion, how we had none of that, no,
In
none whatsoever.
in theory, career advice. Although most of my career advice has been, dude, you got to figure out ways to get this role playing game stuff on your resume because it counts.
Yeah.
Like we talked to all these successful gamer guys who are like, Shannon makes games for a living. She writes them.
Yeah.
Silent Hill just came out, the new one.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of thing. Looks.
There's a real career path. It's interesting. I guess that would be under the techne categorization is when they start running video gaming workshops. I bet they would. It does feel like things have kind of moved in that direction. Any concluding thoughts on this show? Because we're going to also include some of this as its own standalone episode. But any other final thoughts before we share the conversation with Troy Winfrey and Joanne Dramko?
For me, I hope it opens a little door on the vat of new college bands.
Yes.
I was going to say it's nice, but it's not necessarily nice, but it's a way of going back in time because this all happened at the beginning of the takeover. And I think, so many of the things that they say in this episode are still relevant. And we're also quite prescient. And I think at the end, Troy has a kind of salvo about what to do that I thought was pretty interesting.
Awesome. Okay, folks, we hope you enjoy. Look at that. Look at how technology is our friend here in 2023. This is Mike Palmer, joined by three fellow New College alums of some fashion, in no particular order. I'm joined today by Troy Winfrey, Joanne Dramko, and Grant Balfour. Welcome, all of you, to the conversation.
Thanks, Mike.
We mentioned a little bit before we started recording, I'm class of 88. All of you joined New College prior to me. So first off, much love and respect to my elders who are joining me today. But this is a little bit of an oral history exercise. We're trying to understand how people remember New College, how that reconciles or doesn't reconcile with what we're all seeing and hearing today. And then also, if there are any ways in which we can help support each other through the challenges of the current situation at New College. This is also why this format is here for us. I'm going to kind of leave it open-ended. I don't know if any of you wanted to provide some opening thoughts, but we're talking also in response to the DeSantis administration's replacement or installment of six members of the Board of Trustees who have been pretty systematically dismantling some aspects of New College that many of us hold dear. It is part of the culture war, whether we wanted to be in this conversation or not. We're in it now because our small college, under 8,000 graduates in its history, is certainly front and center in a lot of the conversations that are out there today. Thoughts from any of you?
First, did you see that we made Yahoo Finance today? Did you see that? We were in Yahoo Finance.
That's nice.
That's so ridiculous. Like the financial news is talking about New College as an indicator of DeSantis's presidential style, and it's all about the intricacies of the foundation, how the foundation relates to the college, and how the foundation's not going to pay Corcoran's salary, but it's going to try to funnel money into him somehow.
Yeah. This is a huge issue for higher education, and it's really kind of a locus of a lot of things. The balance between private and public higher education, the foundations that support a lot of public education, which has always been kind of uneasy, and people have just sort of agreed not to look into it too hard. And basically the idea of alternative education in and of itself, which this might be it. Really.
Yeah.
I'm thinking the New College may end up being a lot more significant than it might look at first glance. What do you get to do with a gift after you've given it? How do you designate gifts and so on for nonprofit use? How does that change? And again, areas of law that have largely been ignored, mostly, but may come into focus.
Yeah, I think it's just sad that our name is getting out there, but for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
I'm on the West Coast in San Diego, and I have people asking me about New College because they saw it in the news, not because I went to school there or any of the other wonderful aspects of it.
It's surprising, because it is my experience in terms of the reputation of New College is that when people know about it, they generally have a good impression because they've probably worked with a few of us. 7,500 is a relatively small number, but considering the circles that people wind up moving in, I have run into quite a few folks who have met or known someone who went to New College, and generally speaking, that's a good thing. There's a little bit of a halo effect because, like, hey, I knew someone who seemed all right, and it also seemed, my recollection is very much of critical thinkers, people who don't necessarily, I was saying the other day, the internal gyroscope, people who are sort of following their own direction, which is very consistent with the academic philosophy, which is, in the final analysis, the student's responsible for his or her own, educational journey, which, when you're 17 or 18 and you're just on campus, like we're kind of holy rollers to a certain extent. Like at least my recollection was that academic philosophy became something that I felt very personally passionate about. And I think that's probably true for a lot of us really throughout our lives. When you reflect back on your undergraduate experience, for me, that it was at like a mission-based, somewhat intentional academic community.
Yeah,
that's something
that's a good way to put it.
Somewhat intentional, but it's pretty deep, and I think since we overlap, there's probably some cultural elements where, it's very much a product of the late 80s into the early 90s and all the cultural phenomenon that were happening then. That's very different than what students are seeing and feeling today. But I certainly feel for students. Did any of you see the interview of students that was on, I think it was on MSNBC? Yeah, Alex Wagner's interview.
Yeah.
It was pretty inspirational to see the students talking then. It did take me back, and it did seem like there are elements to, being an 18 or 19-year-old New College student that haven't necessarily changed. They certainly had some sense of like mission and belief in, I guess, the student-led aspect of the academic philosophy. Joanne, I know you were mentioning before you're in industry a little bit, you're hiring people. And one thing that was interesting that Pat Oker brought up to me a while back was how New College in some ways inspired an entrepreneurial mindset and like an ability to kind of start new things. Does that resonate with you? Any thoughts on that?
So it's interesting that you mentioned that, because actually the panel that I was just talking about for UC Santa Barbara, one of the reasons they picked me was because they were looking for people that had switched careers, either I'm in the environmental consulting planning industry in California. Regs galore, I'll be employed forever. And I went to New College intentionally too, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to do fine arts or science. So I wasn't attracted to the big schools, FSU and Gainesville. I'm sorry, Stu. But I wanted to be in charge of my own education. And I took science. I was on two tracks. So I took all the science classes and I took all the fine arts classes. I ended up writing a thesis, doing a show in fine arts, doing an exhibit, and writing a thesis, which you don't normally do in undergrad for fine arts. But I also kept all the organic chemistry and physics, and I took all the science classes because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. They had environmental science there. I did take a couple of those, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So when I graduated, I just moved to Los Angeles. Didn't know anybody, but yeah. So I'm Florida. I'm 21 or 22, just got in my car and drove to LA and made my way out there. And I thought I would try fine arts first before I went back to science for whatever reason. So I did that, and I started my own. I was just self-employed for about 8 years doing graphic design and toy design. I'm a painter, but
Oh, those are yours. Our listeners may not be able to see that, but there's some nice art in the, yeah.
That's hers.
But anyway, so I kind of got burned out on that after about 8 years. So this new school, UC Santa Barbara, opened a new master's program for environmental science management, and it was cross-disciplinary, which attracted me to it. And, I was like, I went over there to talk with them. I was like, hey, I got my arts degree, but I took all these prereqs. And they were like, hey, just take a couple more prereqs, take your REs and apply. And they loved me. Like, they were like, oh, they wanted to see people from different backgrounds. And, I picked it up and I got my master's. And then I started my career in environmental planning. So that's, you analyze environmental impacts of new development. So that's what I've been doing for the past 22 years or so.
Yeah.
So yeah, but just being able to shift and kind of roll with the punches and create your own career, I think that was really part of the new college mindset. We create our own path.
Right. Yeah. And I do feel like a lot of us got out into the job market, well, probably underprepared, because there certainly were no.
I would say I wish they had more economics classes at new college.
Yeah. I mean, it's a real shift now. Now they build a lot, like you're assigned a career counselor prior to even your first day on campus. There's someone who's helping you understand what you may find on the other side. But it is interesting, as a latchkey generation,
right?
We were in some ways left to our own devices to kind of sort it out. And then also this was the slacker decade as well. So if you didn't fully understand what was next for you, in some ways that was a signal that you got it, because you didn't necessarily want to sell out.
I mean, I do think one of the metrics that has really kind of hurt new college is, if it prepares graduates for anything, it's for spending a year afterwards going, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
And kind of, what way am I going to make? And then for like a good percentage of us, it's kind of a really interesting way.
Mm-hmm.
I keep running into people like in the strangest places that,
but being able to write and quickly and just assess information in different ways, no matter what you were interested in when you were 18, it changes during the course of your life. And that was attractive to me, because you're not just like, oh, I'm a pre-med and that's your track. And if you decide later, that's too bad. You just wasted all that time. So, taking the cross-disciplinary classes and being able to create your own curriculum without having I have to take these core classes, was really great.
I feel like I should say, like you said, sorry, Stu, early on. Like, I feel like you should explain that we usually, like this time of day, we're usually playing geeky role-playing games. This was another
slot. Yeah.
college guy is like director of telehealth at UF now. It's like a high-up administrator. It's kind of crazy. Like, what a weird gig to wind up in, like the year before COVID hit.
Right.
Nor did he go straight there. So
right.
A straight path there. So
not a straight path there for him, for sure. He took like 8 years to get his undergrad, and then he got his grad like a year after or something.
Yeah, right away.
That's another part of New College's history. It was almost a badge of honor to take a little longer than 4 years, and then that turned into some cautionary tales about longer. 5 years. Yeah, I was on a 5-year. I can say it now.
He went to FAU to finish, right, Graham?
Yeah, he finished at FAU. A lot of people finished. Like, that's the legal definition in the alumni charter of an alum, is somebody who just spent a semester at the school, because people passed through. And then
so we started the Damon. We wanted to make clear, right, that you didn't have to graduate as long as you attended.
Yeah, the kerfuffle. Yeah, and nowadays actually 5 years is standard at traditional four-year colleges when push comes to shove. It's shifted a lot since then. The interesting thing, like thinking back on it, the college, in hindsight, the college was probably at its lowest point ever in history around 1985 or 1986. In terms of finances, they were under-resourced. Even if they wanted to provide career counseling, they didn't have anybody there who had a clue.
Was that when they started to be affiliated with USF?
It had been a couple of years by then.
Yeah, it had been a couple of years by then, but USF didn't pay them or anything. And so
we shared the campus.
Mike's class was interesting because it was much larger than just mine's and seemed more vital and kind of, unusual. Seemed to be some sort of turning point. But that's anyhow. I remember When I graduated and went to the career counseling office, I was given a manila folder which contained a flyer to become a teller at Burnett Bank.
Mm.
More than I got.
That was it. That was
Tell you
literally
what, you should have been grateful.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't want any career counselor
literally it.
at all. You had your guidance. I mean, guidance counselor. Who was your spot? Like who was your
Your thesis sponsor?
Your academic sponsor, yeah.
or academic, like the person that
Knox.
signed your things every year?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't remember career counseling at all.
Yeah,
No.
they didn't. And so the thing is, I have a famous indie consultant whom I love. And he's kind of like a new college type, certainly, Venkatesh Rao. And absolutely brilliant. You can look him up. His Ribbon Farm blog is incredible. And he does a lot of work with CEOs and so forth. But when he graduated, he applied for a job consulting with McKinsey. And he didn't make it through the second interview. And he felt profoundly grateful. He thought that they were both relieved. Because when it came down to it, people at Harvard and people who go to join McKinsey is full of what he called grinders. They have been raised since birth to follow a pattern to succeed. And it is a complex pattern. It is a pattern that is expensive and difficult and, God knows what, but it is a pattern. And a lot of them figure it out. And so then that's what they do. And most kids at New College have no idea that this pattern even exists.
Yeah.
Much less want to try it, right? They don't come from the right class, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Country, it's easier in New England to see what this pattern is. But in any event, so the administration didn't have it either. And so, of course, they are the most valuable if they eventually stumble onto it. And so if you brought that forward a little bit, doing the things, not the pattern, the grind pattern, but the alternative, so that they would end up like Venkatesh Rao sooner rather than later.
Right.
To be honest with you. But they've struggled with articulating that for years because they don't have anybody involved who knows that.
It's interesting.
It reminds me of Todd Rose out of Harvard Graduate School of Ed. He wrote a book called The End of Average, which is basically how you can't, one size fits none. You can't really learn things from averages. But he just wrote his most recent book is called Dark Horse, where he basically contrasts the standardization mindset with the dark horse mindset. And this seems right in line with what you're talking about, Troy, where the idea there is to, in some ways embrace your own quirks and idiosyncrasies as your superpowers. And at least from a cultural, whatever we would call like campus culture, like that did seem to be part of what it was like to be there. You learn to both tolerate and embrace difference, but also like find your own uniqueness and then kind of build the rest of your identity out from there. And that's something that I will forever be grateful for, rather than if I was in a more homogenized, standardized culture. Either I would have given in and become part of the Borg, or I would have not fit and probably had a harder time feeling that sense of belonging that is now very much what people talk about when they talk about, a university experience.
I'll put in a vote for Dark Horse. I read that a couple of years ago. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Mhm.
To everybody.
Yeah. Well, what do you guys think about the mission, which feels almost cheesy now when I see, in the final analysis, the student's responsible for his or her. But at the time, we all just were kind of bought in, and that philosophy then extends to there's no grades and everything's written and there's a thesis defense and there's an emphasis on teaching among the professors. There was a real like intellectual culture.
Easily identified at other colleges too, I think. I feel like I had more friends in other places, other schools in state than a lot of people did. Like I would drive off to Gainesville when the campus got too insular for me. Like I'm tired of seeing my ex-girlfriend every day. I need to go away.
Yeah.
So I'll just go up the road to Gainesville and stay with some friends there. But we kind of had a rep as this weird, parcel of lunatics from Sarasota. Like, I can see where certain elements of today's culture would get the woke indoctrination thing. I think we were maybe indoctrinated, but it was not to whatever they're talking about. It was to, in the final analysis, every student is responsible for his or her own education.
I just think like in today's climate, that seems like such a stretch that you would allow an 18-year-old to be responsible for their.
I think in any climate, really.
Grant, your kids are around that ish age.
My son's looking at military academies now. He's probably going to wind up in the Air Force as an officer. Like, it was that or New College, and I was like, okay, and it's just kind of following where.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think my parents really got. They didn't understand. It was and it's cheaper than Duke, so
if your parents taught at Black Mountain, they got it. If they were one of the Bauhaus refugees, they'd be all over it. But I think, it's really it's not a baby boomer idea, but they're the ones that ran with it, with complete unfettered freedom, which comes with responsibility, a lot of other late night hand waving. New College used to belong to an association of alternative colleges and schools. And I was hungover on Sundays. Sometimes I would go into the office and read all these old publications that people had sent New College, like from the 70s and on up. It was fascinating. And a lot of them just slowly dropped away. And New College, always the most rigorous, most prestigious, and shockingly best funded of all these schools. They're all gone now. They're hanging on by their fingernails. If Antioch is still around, they keep closing and reopening.
Evergreen and Bard. Those are the only other two I can even think of.
St. John's. I remember giving a girl from St. John's a tour of the campus when she was considering transferring and talking about the Great Books program.
Right.
She's kind of
also over the years, the core curriculum, there was more structure prior to, like, I think the late 80s, early 90s was about as unstructured. There really were no requirements. You needed to get a contract, and that was pretty much it. And that was
especially for the ISPs, right? Anything.
Yeah. It was teaching you were learning how to negotiate. You know?
Right. Yeah, I really think that's more the bigger lesson than anything that I learned in an ISP. Was how to get somebody to sign off on a thing. That is something that has served me well through the years. I can tell you a lot about Bantu mythology, but I'll tell you the most important thing that I learned about Bantu mythology was how to get a macroeconomics professor to sign off on that.
That's hilarious.
Joanne and I were involved with an ISP that was used as a cautionary example. Don't do this for years afterward. And we got poor Professor Aaron Edidin, who was in the psych department, to sign. And at a reunion, I apologized. I was like, I'm sorry, and he was like, no, that was one of the best ISPs I ever sponsored. And I was like, really? Our final performance, which we dragged you to at midnight. And Charlie throwing grapes at you. I don't know why.
So the ISP, I don't remember how we structured the pitch, but it was basically to play in our band for a month.
I think it was a spontaneous performance of popular rock music, something like that. We dressed it up. We gave it a lovely title. And
you probably had a paper with it too, right?
Yeah. How long was the paper?
The show I thought was the
show.
Performance I thought was the piece.
That's pretty good.
I wasn't doing no paper. Believe me, I wrote enough papers in English. So I was like, we're not doing
I don't think we wrote a paper. I think it was the performance.
We absolutely did.
Right. Did we write anything new? No, I don't think we wrote anything new.
We wrote a few new songs. Well, actually, Chris Sizemore wrote a few new songs, and then I put lyrics to them.
You were there, Michael? Did you see that show?
I don't remember that show. I would have liked to have seen it. I'm reluctant to talk about some of my ISPs because it's still like, you have those dreams that you didn't actually graduate. I'm concerned that someone may be listening and I will lose credit for one of my ISPs. One of them was, we did an improv troupe. We were called Funny, Funny, Funny. It was a fake improv troupe. And we recorded like a fake documentary
about a really bad improv troupe. And I think I did have to write a paper just to get
started doing all of his.
to get Dave Mullins to sign off on my ISP. So, and if he hears this, thank you, Dave, for your kind auspices in that context. The interesting aspect to all this, and it's come up in a couple different ways, is like, I think this environment, it works for people who can get through it. It's way too high a bar for what we really want out of higher education. And as much as I'm not a fan of social promotion, there is an element of do a minimum amount of work, get out into the workforce, and there's more kids behind you. Let's keep the line moving. New College was very much not that. There were a lot of people who couldn't make it over, and they certainly couldn't make it over in time. There were stories of people who would take 7, 8, 10 years, did make it kind of okay to just hang out.
How long did Rick Doblin take?
He's class of 71, and he
graduated after I did, I think.
When I did.
Really?
Yeah, so 91, 92, something like that. So that's 20 years.
Dropping in, dropping out, I mean, and doing that.
He built the racquetball courts that we had, which are not there anymore.
Oh, yeah.
But he founded a construction company in between the time when he entered New College, kind of dropped out and maybe took a few.
Graduated in 91-ish. 91?
Yeah. And they're
Graduated in 90, Grant. And then
I was 90, yeah. I was 90, but I was around on campus for another year, trying to figure out what the hell to do with my life.
Stuart was still on campus. So were you just still living in that room?
I was not living on campus in 91. I was living off campus. But I was there, like Merlin Mann graduated with me. He was still like living around town. I think Mike Ferguson was still living around town. A couple other people were. It's like, I don't know. What I majored in hermeneutics. What am I going to do with that?
You're going to understand things, man.
Yeah, I'm going to read some texts.
Get some verse to hand.
Yeah. Got to get my Gesamtkunstwerk on.
Exactly.
I've explained it to people as like going on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Any one of you can go with a check, go into the Mercantile Exchange and start betting on hog bellies or orange juice. You don't need any kind of accreditation, anything like that, but you best watch out. Or it's like going to the Grand Prix, a Formula One Grand Prix, and they give you some keys and they're like, okay, that's your car over there. You can do 270 miles an hour. Watch that last turn because it's really tricky on the inside. Now go.
Yeah.
And a lot of people did, and a lot of them had 70s style, end over end fireball crashes.
Yeah.
People just vanished.
Yeah.
But it had a high variability of outcome, which, an investor will tell you is not what you.
Yeah.
For example.
Yeah. A lot of the generational stuff says look at age, period, and cohort effects. So like at a certain point in your life, at an age, something's going to happen. Then there's a cohort you're kind of experiencing this with, and then that's within the broader period that we're living in. I think there's some elements of this that I'd be curious. This is why this has like a new vehicle to talk to people who weren't in my proximity on the space-time continuum, like going to New College, like how much of what we remember and what we believe is true of like the really old heads, those who were there, charter class and early 70s, all that. And then what the cultural experience has been like and what the academic experience has been like in the last, really this century, because it's been 20 years now since, because I would imagine things have gone through some shifts. I've met a few folks across the timeline. I don't know. How about the rest of you? Have you connected with other Novo collegians either? From back in the day.
This week, actually, I think, roughly. Erica's a great person down in St. Pete. I got to know a lot of perspectives when I was involved so heavily with the Damon, different positions and whatnot. And there, it's like anything else. There are some deep commonalities, with the exception of the charter class, which really is an anomaly. Really is. They were sort of a Ford Foundation / Rand Corp, Supermen of the Future, Great Society kind of.
Yeah. It's like the right stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. That just didn't happen. We're going to train a generation of leaders that will lead America into the future. Industry, religion, whatever. No, they didn't. And they were kind of Supermen. I mean, they were fantastic class. But after that, reality intruded kind of quickly.
Well, what about the Damon then too? Because that is an interesting dimension to the conversation now where, I've mostly been off Facebook, but these shenanigans have kind of pulled me back in. And that's also drawn me back to the Damon, which is something you started, Troy.
I remember.
Yeah. And can you describe what it is? Maybe a little bit of the history of that. And I know, Grant, you're now one of the mods.
I'm still in the admin box. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe flesh it out a little. Yeah.
It started with a post that just kind of came spilling out of me, explaining to some of the younger students, well, the campus looked like a used ashtray while we were there. We didn't have steps, and there was literally a place we would jump off the wall in second court to get a, and they have all these steps there now. It's crazy. It's like a real place. And so all these people started jumping in and sharing similar experiences. And then it snowballed from there.
Troy, you started it, or at least one of the reasons you started it. And there had been like fits and starts of NSF trying to do their own group site, and it just never took off. And I thought, Troy, one of your main goals was to do like a job board, like for senior or a career.
Fix some problems, bring a little, not to blow my own horn, a little bit more competence than we were seeing in the space, and which is, consultant's disease. So anyway,
and it was more inclusive too, right? I thought that was another than like it was if you'd done at
bring
least
them all in,
right.
And I it burnt me out, and I pulled back. And one of a very prominent alum reached out to me about a year after I had gone back, and he's like, "Look, we need you to come back." And said, "No, I'm the guy who yells at the team on the radio now."
Classic new college fashion. It started with your idea of doing career support from senior alums to newer people, because new college doesn't really have that. And then like the classic new college form, it just sort of like became everything and to everyone. And it wasn't
group therapy for a while.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A lot of people learned some painful things,
What the hell happened?
It was also, part of that's probably what was happening on Facebook and in Facebook groups over this period of time. Because I also saw, some of the stuff that's happening in Slack. And I feel like every time I'm with a group of people in Slack, the conversation moves in a certain direction. There is a little bit of, platform determinism.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. There definitely is.
And like, that's why I find Facebook to be it's overwhelming, even for a relatively small school, the amount of stuff that can be churning through there to the point where.
And the heightened reactions.
Yeah. The emotionality. Yes.
Younger generations too have a different relationship to posting on social media than older people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm noticing an increasing tendency that you should never say anything serious on social media. That's the point of thinking. And I found out rather late in the Damon tenure, when I was pulling out what was left of my hair, was they had an interior chat system that somebody had created at New College that the students had adopted. They jumped on it with both feet. And so they would chat back and forth anonymously with each other at all hours of the day and night. And it was horrible. It was like 4chan. And they would all go in, and it wasn't even, like first, and it really wasn't funny. And that's how they began to see social media and communication and sort of thing. It's just toxic and corrosive.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't mod something like that, even if you wanted to.
Right.
Just spilled over. Right. And I was, keep the community as big as possible, because splintering it was the problem. Right.
Right.
Yeah. I just couldn't deal with it. It's a deathful point. And this is a whole nother conversation, but I think that New College was uniquely vulnerable after years of neglect to DeSantis.
Yeah.
And it starts at the top and goes all the way down.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it, I've got some conflicted feelings, but I'm really staying out.
Yeah, I was hopeful about the new president. It seemed like she came in a little late, and she seemed like she was moving things in a good direction, but it was above and around her, there was not enough support. There was a vulnerability here that DeSantis, who's also a bully, it's vulnerability. It's like a small school that is kind of
low hanging fruit for them.
and he's got to be, it's got to stick in his craw, that it is that reputation you were talking about, Grant, like it's still there. Like, even within Sarasota, between Sarasota and Ringling, it is like the artsy, it's mostly aging artsy set, but they allow for some like young, hippie art scene to exist in Sarasota. But, once it's on Tallahassee's dime, once it's really funded by an increasingly conservative
legislature,
state government, yes.
Yeah.
The writing is kind of on the wall. But then for it to be like so blatant, it reminds me of when Trump was saying he could shoot someone in the middle. Like it's like the fact, bringing in the new president, for $700,000 salary without any real vetting in the same Board of Trustees meeting that you oust the sitting president, not for cause. That's all just
How do they get away?
true.
Yeah.
And then gonna get away with it. But anyway, so the Damon continues, even if it was too much for you to maintain, you must feel kind of good. Also, the piece that he wrote is pretty great. We can include Troy's, is it a scree? Is it a rant? What would you call that? It's an essay? I don't know what it is.
I produced plenty of those. So yeah, I'm not sure. It may be
which one do you mean?
Because you were describing what the Damon, like this white hot thing that is.
Oh, right. The most
like
recent one he wrote.
Yeah.
It's on Medium. Yeah. I just put it up, left it on Medium. And
Not on the Damon. You didn't put that on the Damon. It was.
I put a link to
someone
it.
may put it on the Damon. I said that they could, but yeah, I just put it back on the Damon.
It's been amazing, some of the writing that's been happening by New College folks now. And now Grant's been doing really great work tracking all of the news and reporting. But like the op-eds and the blog posts, it is, I think this is overly optimistic, but I was likening this to when Obi-Wan lets Vader strike him down, and there is that essence of, in some ways, this is unlocking more of our animus in a way that maybe will generate something positive out of this.
When John White changed himself to the palm tree when they
Exactly.
I think we all got the email. What was it, 2 days ago? Asking for more money.
Friday. It was Friday. He sent it out. Yeah, on a Friday. Hot news.
Yeah.
Right.
Really?
Jesus Christ.
How tone deaf can you be?
I know what to do. I know what would work. I'm not going to do it. And I'm not sure New College is capable of doing it, but I know what would work.
What would work? Tell me what
would work. So, okay. The first thing is you have to figure out what you want. First thing is there are two basic strategies here. You have to burn down something he cares about, meaning DeSantis and his goons, and you have to make the thing he's taking poisonous.
Yeah. Okay. So
the way you do that, the way you burn down something he cares about is you organize a boycott of Florida, which a lot of people would be happy to arrange. And it worked in North Carolina. Now, this would require quite a bit of effort. There are alums who have connections that could get things going. So, all right, Amazon, you want to open a new center, don't open it in Florida. Boeing, you want to open a new plant, don't open it in Florida, and so on. And if you stay out of Florida just a little bit, that's the one thing that will hurt DeSantis, because that's what Florida is.
How would that help New College, though? Because they could just spin it any way they want.
Well, because it would get him out of office and it would get people mad. And so the thing is, it's like, well, hey, man, you just fascist jackbooted this innocent little school and look what happened. If you're still in office, maybe you ought to ease on up some. And if not, it'll just be satisfying.
Sure, when he starts going after Disney, I think you'll have a little bit more momentum for doing something.
Well, exactly. So, yeah, I'm sure that Disney's not happy. So anyway, the second thing is just use the deep state against him at New College. So ask the Department of Ed to investigate federal funding for New College and potential irregularities, because it's squeaky clean, which probably is. Oh, my God, you don't want that. Secondly, the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, which is the worst one in the nation, the ones that are most hard ass about, have them investigate. And
they're already on.
I think they're planning to lose the accreditation, is what it seems like, because Hillsdale's not accredited. So I feel like they're sort of saying, screw it. We don't need. We don't need any other thing than
It's
Florida.
accredited. It's just through a different agency.
Fine. That's fine. Maybe they
Right.
can carry that rock, but the whole point is to carry 40 rocks, right? You keep dropping them. So that's
Yeah.
one. Federal Department of Ed, and that is something they can't laugh off
Yeah.
because they are so dependent on every
I
school.
think some of these things are already happening,
Yeah.
just on their own, just
There's
spontaneously
also a
emerging.
there'll be a presidential campaign though
Yeah.
before he's elected again in Florida, he'll be running for president like tomorrow, so there
That's
is.
also something he cares about. So he might is what I'm saying. So finally, I mean, things like reaching out to the AAUP and to the Association of American Grad Schools and asking them to forego accepting new college students to their programs after 2024. So,
That might happen. Yeah.
and so, I mean, that's the whole thing. That's what fighting looks like.
Yeah.
Talking about how great the school is, that's throwing rocks at a tank.
Right.
Yeah.
In good faith. He doesn't care how good it is. That's not the issue.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking as soon as the current crop of students leave, they'll just feed in with the students.
Yeah.
That's what they're hoping for.
Just goes, the problem goes away.
Cross it
It
over.
doesn't
Yeah.
work like that. It does not work like that. It's broken. It does not work like that. It takes years, even at a small scale.
Yeah.
They don't even know how to pay a salary. They haven't even lined up.
Years to implement what you're suggesting as well. Even if they
What's time you might think, you can probably do it in 6 months. The boycott would be the big one. And I think people would be more than happy to do that.
It is tricky though, because it is, it's a little bit of, King Solomon here, right? Like who's willing to kill the baby? They're really attached to it. So it does feel like they've gone in with a lot of scenarios where it's unfavorable to new college and they don't really care, because it does feel like if they wanted to start a Hillsdale in the South, they could have done it in Tallahassee. There's
Right.
plenty of Bible colleges would have been, try to be front of the line. Instead, they want to own the libs. They want to take out a lot of it. I think is around LGBTQ too.
That's the secret. That's the thing that is not being said out loud
It plays
by
well.
some.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not necessarily something you want to say, even in Florida, in certain quarters.
Yeah.
Because there's a huge LGBTQ population in Florida, and they do vote.
Mhm. Anyway, I just to be conscious of folks' schedules.
Right.
If you have any concluding thoughts, I'll stop recording after, not before. If you have concluding thoughts, I'd love to hear them. I'm trying to figure out how to have more of this, because it is therapeutic. I do find it extremely useful to me just to have people who kind of feel similarly, because it does feel like because there were so few of us that the bonds over a longer horizon become much deeper, where if you do see someone who, went there, and now if it does become even like that, there's 8,000 of us and there will be no more of us,
Right.
it becomes even more
Pride.
important somehow,
I mean, I've got a fair amount of experience with higher ed, both being in it and working in it and being closely involved with people who, worked in it, dating a lot of, PhD women. I've dated 2 people who were on Jeopardy. So put that in my
We're on, or did they win, Troy? I mean, like, what are we talking?
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, actually quite a bit of money.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm not from New College though. So anyway, the point being, I haven't seen this kind of alum ties outside of Harvard, not even Stanford, so broad based. Like people at Harvard who have just, oh yeah, that was 30 years,
Moved on.
whatever. But here we are still. I mean, talking. That's
I was
the
talking to my boss who wrote that blog about me. But,
Oh yeah, that was a good blog. I like that.
he went to Brown and I was, chatting about this and he was asking me because he saw it in the news and he's like, what do you care? Like, I couldn't care less what happened to Brown. I got my degree and left. And I'm like, it's different,
Yeah.
in a nutshell. That's it. And, they failed to capitalize on that for decades.
Yeah.
Decades.
Yeah, I think we kind of flourished by being forgotten to a certain degree.